yesterday we looked at a whole bunch of items to see if they would sink or float. And we made a chart over here to see what would happen. And we found out that everything has particles, and water even has particles, and they're kind of spread out. And if something has particles that are more compact together, it has more density and it'll sink to the bottom. If they're spread out more than the water, it'll float on the top. So today we are going to look at a vehicle that can sink and float. Okay? Now, what would happen if a car went in the water? Would a car float on top or would it sink to the bottom? It would sink to the bottom. A car should not go in the water, right? What would happen if a boat went in the water? Would it float on top or would it sink to the bottom? We sure hope that the boat's going to float on top because that's the purpose of it, right? Well, there is a vehicle that does both things. It can float on top and then it can also sink to the bottom, okay? And it's supposed to do both things. What that vehicle is called is a submarine. Okay, here's my little submarine. And a submarine can stay at the top and it can go to the bottom as well. So we're going to learn a little bit about submarines, and then I've got a couple activities for us today, okay? So we're gonna start with a book called Super Submarines. I'm gonna read this, I'm gonna show you a quick video, and then we are gonna do some things together. All right. Super Submarines by Tony Mitten and illustrated by Ant Parker. All righty. See if I can get my camera good. A submarine's a type of boat that dives beneath the sea. Below the waves is such a strange and wondrous place to be. To dive, it takes in water until its tanks are full. The weight of water gives the submarine a downward pull. When it's underwater, the propeller makes it go. The hydroplanes can tilt to steer it up or down, like so. The rudder also steers the sub and turns it left or right. Computers help navigate. Down deep, there's not much light. The periscope can poke above the waves to peer around, but farther down, the submarine depends on sonar sound. The sonar sends a signal out, a special type of beep that bounces back to help them guess what's out there in the deep. A submarine must have a crew to run it night and day. The crew needs living quarters where they eat and rest and play. Submersibles are different subs that probe the deepest ocean. Down that far, it's still and dark. There's hardly any motion. But even there, submersibles discover deep-sea creatures that glow or carry lanterns and have very funny features. Look at those strange creatures. Submersibles are used to rescue divers or explore. They sometimes salvage sunken wrecks upon the ocean floor. They're used to service oil rigs, lay cables, and fix pipes. Their robot subs have cameras and arms of many types. So they can send robots to the bottom of the ocean to help fix things. But look, our sub is rising. Its work below is done. Very soon, the busy crew will see the sky and sun. Its ballast tanks have emptied. They've pushed the water out. The submarine is back in dock. Hooray, the sailors shout. All right, so here is a submarine, and here are some different parts. Up here, this is a periscope, and that's used to see what's above the surface of the water. So this periscope would be sticking out of the water if the rest of the ship was sunk. There's a hydroplane right here. It tilts to steer the sub up or down. The propeller back here pushes the sub through the water. The rudders are at the bottom and it turns to steer the sub from side to side. And then we've got a submersible. This is a different type of submarine that carries and controls the robot sub. And here's the robot sub. The mini sub can reach into small and narrow spaces where the crew can't go. All right. So that is about a submarine. And I'm going to show you a quick video to show you how submarines actually work. And then I'm going to show you a little demonstration, okay? So I'll be right back with you. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry. There we go.
Really? And then what happened? That's great. Squeaks was just telling me about a story he was reading. It was about a submarine exploring the ocean. You want to go on a submarine too? That sounds like it could be a lot of fun. Maybe someday we can visit a submarine. Actually, a viewer named Sam sent us a question about submarines not too long ago. Submarines are kind of like boats, except they go under the water. And Sam wanted to know more about how they do that. And Squeaks does too. Well, submarines work because of the way things sink and float, and some really smart thinking. You probably know that when you put things in water, some of them float to the top and some of them sink to the bottom. We did an experiment to learn why things float or sink with our friends Bill and Webb. Do you remember that, Squeaks? We learned that whether something floats depends on its density, or how heavy it is for its size. If it's heavier for its size than water, it sinks. If it's lighter, it floats. For example, a plastic spoon isn't very heavy for its size, so it floats. But a metal spoon is pretty heavy for its size, so it sinks. That's how boats float too. They're really heavy. You wouldn't be able to just pick one up. But they're not actually very heavy compared to how big they are. They're not very dense, so they float. And submarines can float on top of the water for the same reason. But for a submarine to be able to go under the water, it needs some of that really smart thinking I mentioned earlier. To dive into the water, a submarine needs to become heavier for its size. It needs to be more dense. But it's not so easy to make something heavier when you're in the middle of the ocean. That's why submarines have big tanks called ballast tanks. When it's time for the submarine to dive down, the ballast tanks open up so they fill with water. Adding the weight of the water to the submarine makes it dense enough to sink. You can see how this works if you have an empty bottle or jar and a bowl of water. At first, if you put the bottle or jar in the water, it will float because the only thing inside it is air. It's very light for its size, so it's not very dense. But if you take the cap off and let the water in from the bowl, it will sink. The water makes it heavier for its size, just like putting water into the ballast tanks on a submarine does. The rest of the submarine is very strong and sealed up tight, so water can't get in, and so that if there are people on the submarine, they can breathe. To make sure they don't run out of air, they bring along extra air that's all squeezed together inside a bottle, like how you squeeze air into a bicycle tire when you pump it up. And then they can go exploring under the water, just like the people in the story Squeaks was reading. In real life, we use submarines for all kinds of things, including learning more about the oceans. When scientists send submarines under the water, they find so many cool animals. There are jellyfish, octopuses, crabs, fish, and tons of animals we've never even seen before. But after the submarine is done exploring under the water, there's one more thing it needs to be able to do. Maybe you've already guessed what it is. We know how submarines dive under the water, but how do they get back up? Well, remember how submarines bring along extra air? If there are people on the submarine, they can use it to breathe. But it's not only for breathing. When it's time for the submarine to go back up to the surface, it pushes air into the ballast tanks and water out. That makes the submarine lighter for its size, so it can float up to the top of the water. It really is a very smart way of using science to explore the world. Thanks for joining us. If you have more questions about submarines or exploring the oceans or anything at all, we have a website where you can send them to us.
All right, so it's pretty cool how a submarine can work. It's filled with air, but then it can fill its tanks with water to sink to the bottom. So here I have some water and I have my little submarine. Now my submarine is filled with air. There's nothing in here, okay? So if I put my submarine in the water, it's going to float, right? Now my submarine doesn't have tanks in it, so I have to fill up, there's a hole on the top. I'm just gonna fill it with water. But when it gets enough water, what should happen? It's gonna sink down to the bottom, right? That's what we would hope. So can you see the bubbles go? Means the air's leaving and the water's filling up. Let's see, well, it's lower, but it's not sinking yet. Hold a lot of water. All right, so now it can explore down to the bottom of the ocean because it has more density because of that water that was added. So that's how a submarine works, and people are inside it. So that's why it has tanks on the side that fill with the water so they can still breathe. They're not swimming around inside of it. All right, what we're going to do next is we are going to be making our own submarine. So what I want for you to do is if you have some paper and a pencil or crayons or markers or whatever, go grab that real quick. Ooh, beautiful. And remember, I'll answer all of your questions at the end of class, so just hold on tight and you can share with me when we're done. All right. Give everybody a minute to get their stuff. And let's put our paper sideways, okay? So go ahead and put your paper sideways. I'm just going to draw in here. That way you'll have more room. All right. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to make a big oval in the middle of the paper. So let me see if I can move you guys up a little bit so you can see my picture better. There we go. All right, in the middle of your paper, draw a big oval, and that's going to be the body of the submarine. Okay. Then in the middle, we're going to make a circle. On the right, we'll make another circle, and on the left, we'll make another circle. So we have 3 circles, and those are going to be our windows so the crew can see out. If you get stuck behind, you can just watch and add to it, and I'll post the video too. All right, next on the top, we're gonna make 2 little lines that are slanted towards each other. You see that? And then let's connect them. Yoop. All right. On top of it, we're going to make a big 7. Make a big 7. And at the end of that 7, let's make a circle. And then we can come in with we had a big 7, let's make a little 7 next to it. And that's gonna be our periscope that's gonna look out over outside of the water, above the water. So they're inside and they can look in there and they can see what's around. All right, now let's come back here to the very back and we're gonna make 2 little lines. And on the end of those 2 lines, we're gonna make a triangle. So watch this. Here's my straight line and my triangle. A little tail. And on top of my triangle, I'm going to make a V. And with that V, we're going to turn it into kind of like a little ice cream cone. We're going to connect those lines. And that'll be the top of our propeller. And at the bottom of the tail, we can make an upside down V and an upside down ice cream cone. Connect those. So now we have our propeller that's going to spin on the back to move our submarine. All right. Between this part with the periscope and our propeller, let's make a little kind of curved triangle on the top and the bottom, and those will be like our fins. If you notice, it's kind of cool when we learned about airplanes and rocket ships and now submarines, there's a lot of the same words that they use, a lot of the same parts to use on all of those vehicles. All right, now we're going to come up here, and in the middle of our periscope here, we're going to make some waves so that everything else is underwater except for that little periscope. Now, do you remember when I sunk my submarine, all those bubbles that came out? That's going to happen here too. So let's come back to our propeller. Let's make some little bubbles that are coming out. Make some circles. And those bubbles are going to be going up. And of course, we need to have some cool sea creatures down there, right? So you want to make some fish or some different kinds of creatures. You can make them however you want. Not sure what that thing is. And there you have a submarine. So now after class, if you want to color it in, make it all bright and colorful, go for it. That was a pretty easy way to make a submarine though, wasn't it? All right, I want to see these. So if you have it done, can you hold it up to the screen so I can see? Ooh. Oh, these are cool. And you guys make way better sea creatures than I do. Awesome. These are super cool. All right. I just have one more thing I want to show you. And this is something that you can do at home, kind of like a little submarine experiment. All right, hold on. Okay, so what you can do, was anybody able to try out some objects yesterday, sinking and floating? In a sink or a bathtub or something? Cool, awesome. It's always fun to play with water. Well, you can wait for it to get warmer and maybe you can do it outside. All right, so here is something else you can do. If you have some water, there is a holiday coming up. Empty my submarine. Not St. Patrick's Day, but something in a few more weeks, Easter. And at Easter, we usually get some Easter eggs, right? Easter eggs make perfect items to turn into submarines. So what you can do with an Easter egg, usually they have some little holes back here, right? So if I put them in here, it's going to float at first, but if it fills with water, it might sink. So to do our experiment, I'm going to get a little bit of tape to plug my holes. So I just have some clear tape. You could use whatever tape you have, or Play-Doh or clay or something like that could work. And I'm just gonna put a piece of tape inside to cover my holes, okay? So I have one on both sides to cover the holes so water won't get in. And then you can see how you can make it float. So you can find items around the house to see, like the pennies we did yesterday with the foil boats, to see how many pennies you can get in here before it floats or before it sinks. So it holds one. Let's see if I can, there's 3. I think it'll go down. Nope, it's still there. So you can test out things like pennies, or I have little pom-pom puff balls, anything you have at home that is fine to get wet, and see if you can make your Easter egg submarine go to the bottom. Okay, so that's something else fun that you can play around with, or when it gets nice outside and you can play with water. All right, before I open this up to you guys asking questions and just chatting and hanging out, I want to say thank you so much for coming. On Thursday, I have to be at a meeting, and so I can't make class. I am going to record a video and I'll post it on my Clever page, and I will also send it to your teacher, so they should be able to send it out to you on your Canvas page. So I'll still teach a lesson, but I can't be here. So I'm very sad about that. But it's been so good seeing you guys, and thank you so much for coming. If you want to just go off and color your submarine or have lunch or whatever, that's fine. And everybody that wants to chat and ask questions, please stay around and I will unmute you. Okay. So I'll see you guys later.